We arrived at Dầu Tiếng late in the afternoon. The sun was dipping behind thick, tangled forest canopies, painting the sky in tones of orange and purple. Lon, our director, sat in the passenger seat of my dusty SUV, anxiously tapping her phone. Meanwhile, in the back seat, Hai, our cameraman, fiddled with a tangle of cables, and Kyo, our lead actress, had her headphones on, trying to memorize lines. We were one of 3 vehicles. The rest of the film crew trailed us, a small box truck carrying lighting gear, plus a sedan with the rest of the team. This was no ordinary film shoot. We aimed to produce a short horror movie set in a region rumored to be haunted by the restless spirits of fallen soldiers, men who fought and died decades ago. From the capital, we'd driven almost 4 hours north, chasing leads about an abandoned memorial deep in the wilderness of Dầu Tiếng. Word had it that local villagers still heard mysterious singing at night, as if from a phantom platoon echoing from the war. Lon insisted that authenticity was paramount. She wanted real surroundings for maximum atmosphere. The highlight would be a night scene near the memorial. Our plan was to film a sequence in which our actress, wearing a ghostly costume, chases after her co-star through the tangle of trees. Then we'd capture a tense confrontation right at the old neglected war statue. We expected the shoot to last until well after midnight. As we pulled up to the site, the roads became increasingly narrow, lined with tall grasses swaying in the wind. We finally parked near a small clearing. In the fading light, we could make out a weathered monument standing about 100 meters away, a single statue of a soldier holding a rifle overhead, chipped and stained by decades of rain. Grass and wild bushes had grown waist-high around it. The place felt forlorn, as though cut off from the living world. Yet something about the air was thick with tension. Even before we stepped out, I felt goosebumps. Kyo commented she'd caught a weird vibe, like we were trespassing on sacred ground. Lon asked me to kill the engine. We all got out, scanning the area. A few battered stone markers, possibly graves or old memorial plaques, dotted the perimeter. The rest of the team parked behind us. People emerged, our audio tech, 2 lighting assistants, a production assistant, and the co-star actor, named Thuan. We had about 15 in total, a modest but passionate crew. Everyone seemed excited but uneasy. We had expected isolation. Still, the quiet was unnerving. Distant crows cawed from somewhere in the trees. Lon asked us to gather in a circle. "Before we start unloading," she said in a low voice, "let's pay respects." She took out incense sticks. We had all agreed to this. It's customary in many Vietnamese horror shoots to say a small prayer, hoping not to anger any spirits. We lit the incense, bowing to the monument. The wind rustled, carrying the sweet yet pungent smell of burning joss. I prayed silently, "Let us work peacefully here. We mean no harm." No strange signs appeared. But I couldn't shake the odd feeling that the monument was watching us. Dusk descended fast. After prayers, we started setting up, unloading boxes of gear, finding suitable spots for the generator, hooking up cables for lighting. The plan was to film our daytime scenes first, capturing transitional shots of Kyo exploring the area. Then we'd break for dinner, and once night fell completely, we'd film the chase and the final confrontation near the statue. But from the start, problems cropped up. Hai's main camera refused to power on, despite the battery being fully charged an hour before. We changed the battery, still no luck. Another camera worked, but its audio input glitched. Then our production assistant discovered that the lighting kit had a missing adapter. She was sure she'd packed it. We rummaged through every case, to no avail. All the while, the forest seemed to close in. The thick canopy overhead blocked what little sunlight remained, making the entire clearing feel prematurely dark. A hush fell over the crew. The usual lively chatter turned to hushed murmurs. Around 5:45 p.m., Lon told me, "We'll skip the transitional shots. We can't waste time." She approached Kyo. "Get into costume. We'll do the chase scene right away before it's too dark." The actress nodded, rummaging for her pale, ghostly dress and makeup kit. A half hour later, Kyo emerged from behind our makeshift changing booth, a large sheet pinned between 2 vehicles. She wore tattered white, face painted to appear cadaverous. Even the simplest movements made her look haunting. The effect was impressive. Our behind-the-scenes photographer snapped a few stills. The rest of us grabbed minimal gear, 1 functioning camera, a portable LED panel, and a slender boom mic, to hike deeper into the brush. The rest of the team stayed behind, continuing to troubleshoot the main camera and prep the second location near the statue. Walking about 50 meters from the vehicles, we found a small footpath winding through tall shrubs and spindly trees. The scene would have Kyo's ghost silhouette weaving around the trunks, heading toward a vantage point by the monument. We planned to shoot from behind, capturing her stumbling posture, but trouble struck again. The LED panel flickered the moment we turned it on, as though the battery was nearly dead. Yet we'd charged it that morning. Kyo stood in place, arms folded, shivering slightly in the growing chill. We flicked switches, wiggled cables. Nothing. The panel blinked, then died. I pulled out my walkie-talkie to call the others for help, but the device only emitted static. Repeated tries, no response. Possibly we were out of range, or some glitch jammed the signal. "Let's just go back," Kyo whispered, wide-eyed. "This is weird." "Hi," frowning at the powerless LED, agreed. "No point filming if we have no light." We all felt uneasy. The breeze carried the faint smell of damp earth and something sour. I had a strong urge to leave this place. "Yeah, let's regroup," I said. As we turned to head back, I heard it, a sudden soft singing. Almost a hum, drifting from beyond the trees. I froze, scanning for the source. It was too gentle for a radio or phone. Instead, it seemed like an otherworldly lullaby, repeated by many voices. Goosebumps prickled down my arms. We all stared at each other, eyes wide. Who was singing out here, in the middle of nowhere? The sense of intrusion loomed. Kyo's lips parted in silent alarm. Lon whispered, "We need to go." None of us needed further urging. We hustled back along the overgrown path, ears straining for that impossible chorus. The singing rose slightly, as though carried by the wind, then faded. By the time we broke into the clearing by the vehicles, my heart hammered. We found the rest of the crew, who greeted us with anxious faces. They noticed our shaken looks, asked what happened. We tried explaining the flickering lights, the faint singing. Someone cursed under their breath. Kyo was ghost white. Lon looked as though she wanted to call off the entire shoot. We decided to re-evaluate. The camera gear was partially functional again. Someone had found a workaround. But the sense of foreboding was unmistakable. It was only 6:45 p.m., and night had truly settled, turning the memorial's silhouette into a looming sentinel. We had no idea the worst was yet to come. We deliberated. Half the crew wanted to pack up and leave. The other half, including Lon, insisted we at least attempt the key scene we'd come for. The entire short film hinged on the night chase culminating at the soldier statue. "We've come this far," she said, voice trembling. "We can't waste all that effort. Let's push through." Reluctantly, we agreed, but we set a strict rule. If anything else bizarre happened, we'd call it off. We prepared the main camera, tested the generator, and set up 2 large LED spotlights about 20 meters from the statue, aiming to create a dramatic glow. Kyo's costume was already on, though the edges of her white dress had collected smudges from the earlier trek. She looked genuinely spooked, which ironically served the atmosphere of the scene. We approached the statue, a battered monument rising on a low concrete platform. Painted lettering had long since flaked off. The soldier figure soared overhead, rifle in hand, face carved in a stern expression. Weeds poked through cracks in the base. Nearby were several stone slabs, presumably commemorative plaques. Kyo's role: she'd appear from behind one plaque, performing the ghost's final reveal. Thwan, her co-star, was supposed to limp into frame, attempting to escape her. The script had them confront each other near the statue, culminating in a harrowing moment where the ghost hushes him with a single finger to his lips. We ran a quick rehearsal. The generator droned in the background, fueling our spotlights. For a moment, everything seemed manageable. The lights were bright enough, the camera rolled smoothly. But as soon as we tried to record the actual take, our audio monitor crackled with static. The sound operator fiddled with knobs, cursing softly. The static soared, making it impossible to pick up dialogue. Meanwhile, Kyo and Thwan stood in position, waiting. The rest of us hovered behind the camera, anxious. I saw the red battery indicator on the main camera flick from full to half in a matter of seconds. "Is this a joke?" I muttered, tapping the battery gauge. Then, just as the audio operator was about to switch cables, a distant noise punctured the air, footsteps. Several footsteps, in unison, marching from behind the statue. We all froze. Lon flicked her flashlight into the darkness around the monument. Nothing. But the footsteps continued, measured and rhythmic, as if an entire squad of soldiers were pacing behind the memorial. The hair on my arms stood. Kyo let out a little yelp, stepping back. The footsteps came closer, echoing on unseen ground. Tension soared. Then, abruptly, it stopped. Silence crashed back in. Everyone stared, breathing fast. Did you hear that? Thwan whispered, eyes darting around. No one answered. They'd all heard. Cameraman Hai lifted the lens toward the rear of the memorial. I'm going to see, he murmured, voice shaking. Lon put a hand on his arm. No. Don't. We'll go together. That's when the singing returned, slow melodic chanting, carried on the breeze from the very direction we'd heard the marching. It was the same spectral hum from earlier, but now it sounded stronger, layered by multiple voices. My chest tightened. Without further discussion, we started backing away from the statue. The generator's rumble felt surreal against the ghostly chorus. Kyo's expression contorted in terror. Then, as if triggered by the singing, she abruptly let out a shriek and collapsed to her knees, sobbing. Chaos erupted. The gaffer tried to help her up, but she thrashed, face twisting in panic. They're right there, she wailed, pointing at the empty air behind the statue. They're watching us. The rest of us reeled in shock. Lon shouted to cut the lights, to shut off the generator, to calm the environment. A lighting tech scrambled for the off switch, but Kyo's meltdown grew worse. She clawed at the ground, tears cutting through her white face paint. Another person yelled, "Get her to the car." We hurried to pick her up. Thwan threw his jacket around her shoulders, trying to console her. The singing had tapered off, replaced by a suffocating hush. No one could muster the courage to linger. We retreated en masse, leaving the statue, the cables, the lights, everything. Our unspoken agreement was that we had crossed a line. The memory of those phantom steps, that haunting chorus, carved itself into our minds. When we got back to the vehicles, Kyo was in a state. Her sobs turned into an eerie, gasping cry. Her eyes seemed unfocused, as if seeing something behind us. The makeup on her face only intensified the horror, giving her the look of an actual specter. I tried to calm her, placing a hand on her shoulder, but she jerked away, screaming. "They're here," she moaned. "They're all around." Then she started babbling words that made no sense, like she was half dreaming. Lon was pale as paper, trembling but trying to keep composure. She radioed our second assistant director, who had stayed closer to the vehicles. "We're coming out," she gasped. "We need to get away. We have to drive out of this place. Now." Our plan was to load everyone into the cars, at least to retreat to a more populated area, perhaps a roadside diner or small town. But as we scrambled around, we realized we had too many vehicles to manage and not enough comm drivers. Our group was in total disarray. Some were already in the box truck, some in the sedan, some by my SUV. The production assistant who'd come with me from the forest shouted for help. Another actress, who had also been waiting near the cars, was now weeping uncontrollably. She clutched her head, repeating that she heard voices calling her name from the trees. "They keep saying my name," she whimpered. "They're telling me to come." Two of our guys tried consoling her, but she started convulsing, her limbs flailing. The chaos mounted. People were yelling contradictory commands. "Get to the car." "No, wait for the others." "Bring water." "Someone help her." Within moments, we had two actresses suffering what appeared to be hysterical breakdowns. The rest of us hovered in shock, uncertain how to help. The sense of menace pressed on us like a thick fog. Finally, Lon snapped into action. "Grab them both," she ordered me in high, pointing to Kyo and the other actress, "and get them in the SUV. We'll drive to the main road. The rest can follow." It took everything in me to keep Kyo from clawing my face. Her slender frame should have been easy to restrain, but fear gave her manic strength. She jerked out of my grip and collapsed on the ground again, sobbing so loudly it echoed among the trees. My mind reeled. This can't be real. It's like we're in the middle of an actual horror movie. At last, with help from Thwan and Hai, we half-carried, half-dragged Kyo to my SUV's back seat. Another friend did the same with the second actress. We slammed the doors, hopped in, and told Lon, "Go drive." Lon revved the engine. Headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the dusty trail leading back to the main road. In the side mirror, I caught a glimpse of the statue's silhouette behind us, a lonely shape in the gloom. And just for an instant, I could have sworn I saw figures standing by it, faint outlines of people in old uniforms, gazing after us. The drive felt endless, though it was only about 20 minutes to the nearest paved highway. Kyo alternated between sobbing and silence, her eyes open but unfocused. The other actress had fainted, slumped against the door. Lon kept glancing at the rearview mirror, as if expecting something to chase us. I couldn't blame her. My heart hammered so fiercely I could barely form words. The memory of that ghostly chorus lingered in my mind, impossible to rationalize. Eventually, we spotted the dull glow of streetlights marking the outskirts of a small township. The place was modest, a single strip of shops, a few houses, and a neon sign indicating a small guest house. We pulled up next to it, the rest of our cruise vehicles parking behind us in a scattered line. The relief was palpable the moment we saw other people. The local residents eyed us curiously, our trucks, our disheveled appearances. A few neighbors peered from doorways, suspecting we were city folks up to something odd. We managed to check into 2 large rooms at the guest house. We carried the stricken actresses inside, laid them on the beds, and fetched water. Gradually, Kyo's trembling eased. She stared at the ceiling with vacant eyes. "I felt them," she whispered at last. "So many of them, and they didn't want us there." No one challenged her words. We all felt similarly. If we had intruded on a realm of restless spirits, their message was clear: go away. Lon gathered the crew in the guest house courtyard to talk. Shadows from a single overhead bulb cast everyone in sharp angles. People were exhausted, frightened. Some demanded an immediate return to the city, no matter the hour. Others said they needed rest. We decided to wait until morning before making the long trip back. Around 11 p.m., I stepped out to find a little convenience store for food or water. Passing by a local eatery, I overheard 2 older men chatting. One of them was describing strange singing that villagers claimed to hear in the forested areas, especially near old war monuments. He said many avoided that zone after dusk. My stomach knotted. Even the locals knew. Returning to the guest house, I found half the crew attempting to sleep, though nightmares were likely. The other half sat up, wide awake, eyes flicking toward the windows. Occasional vehicles rumbled down the highway, but it did little to calm the tension. Kyo drifted in and out of restless slumber, muttering about the soldiers under her breath. The second actress had woken, but refused to speak about what she'd heard or seen. We gave them space. At some point after midnight, I dozed off on a plastic chair, lulled by the low hum of insects. But my dreams were plagued with visions of ghostly silhouettes standing behind that battered statue, their invisible eyes locked onto us. At dawn, we roused ourselves, loaded up vehicles, and started back to the city. No one wanted to speak of the incident, though it hung over us like a shroud. Kyo was physically better, but emotionally shaken. She said little, avoiding eye contact. We parted ways by early afternoon. Lon informed us that for the time being, the project was on hold. She needed to review what little footage we managed to capture, see if anything was salvageable. The general consensus: we'd likely never return to that particular site. Later that week, still disturbed by the memories, I did some research. Dầu Tiếng was known for intense wartime activity decades ago. Many young soldiers had perished in that region, their remains scattered. The memorial we found was apparently built in the 1980s, but had been abandoned when local funding dried up. Over time, the forest reclaimed it. Residents of nearby hamlets reported seeing strange lights at night, hearing faint singing like old marching songs. A local contact told me that the statue was rumored to be guarded by the spirits of men who fell in an ambush. People avoided the area because any who lingered after dark claimed to hear the phantom platoon. Some nights, if unlucky, you might glimpse them. The contact said, "They're not evil. They're just restless. They want respect." That explanation weighed on my mind. We had tried to pay respects, lighting incense. But filming a horror movie there, was it disrespectful to them? Possibly so. Perhaps we'd intruded on sacred ground to stage an entertainment piece. Regardless, the direct phenomenon we witnessed, malfunctioning equipment, the footsteps, the singing, the meltdown, felt beyond mere superstition. I recalled how Kyo's meltdown ended only after we fled the forest. She later confided that she felt a surge of oppressive sadness, as though hundreds of watchers had closed in on her soul. Lon tried to compile the footage for an initial edit, but most of it was unusable. Audio was filled with static or random echoes. The night scenes were nearly all black. The final blow, the camera files from the statue segment were corrupted. A single partial clip showed Kyo turning to face the lens, eyes wide with terror, then a sudden distortion that froze the video. Not 1 second beyond that. The entire fiasco left me unsettled. By day, I tried to rationalize. By night, the memory returned. More than once, I woke in a cold sweat, thinking I heard that spectral choir drifting on the night breeze. A month later, Lon called a meeting. She decided to shelve the short film indefinitely. The sponsor withdrew partial funding due to the incomplete production. Some crew members refused to film a haunted war zone ever again. Kyo, in particular, insisted she was done with the project. But Lon also said something intriguing. She planned a small ceremony to properly thank the spirits we disturbed and to ask forgiveness. She believed we should finish what we started, at least on a spiritual level. This wasn't about filming. It was about healing. She invited me, Kyo, and a few others who had been present in that final night at the statue. Many declined, but I agreed, feeling it was the right thing to do. We returned to Dầu Tiếng on a quiet Sunday morning. Just Lon, Kyo, Thuan, me, and 2 of the production assistants. This time, we went to the local district center first, purchasing flowers and additional incense. We also brought a small offering tray with fruit, tea, and paper money. Entering the forest again felt surreal. In daylight, the path to the memorial seemed less foreboding, though patches of shade under the trees gave me flashbacks. The statue stood just as before, chipped and lonely. We formed a half-circle around it. Lan lit incense. "We're sorry," she said aloud in a trembling voice, as if speaking to the unseen watchers. "We came here to film, but we didn't mean any disrespect. We pray that you can forgive our intrusion." Kyo held a single white chrysanthemum, tears brimming. Her gaze flicked around, as though expecting the same footsteps from that night. But everything was silent except for cicadas buzzing. She set the flower at the statue's base, bowing low. We each placed our offerings carefully. It felt solemn, humbling. I found myself whispering an apology under my breath. The memory of that chilling chorus still haunted me. In some sense, I hoped this gesture might bring them peace, and perhaps me too. A gentle breeze stirred. The leaves rustled overhead. For a moment, I thought I heard a faint hum, reminiscent of a distant chant. Then it dissipated. Maybe it was only the wind, or maybe we had, in our own small way, done the right thing by acknowledging them. We stayed only 20 minutes, not daring to linger. As we left, Kyo said softly, "I feel lighter somehow." She managed a small smile. Part of me believed the spirits had accepted our remorse. We never resumed filming the horror movie at Dầu Tiếng. The sponsor pivoted to a different concept, and Lon moved on to smaller projects in the city. But everyone who experienced that night carried lasting scars of awe and fear. Kyo needed weeks of counseling to cope with the panic attacks triggered by the memory of invisible watchers. She eventually returned to acting but avoided any supernatural themes. Thuan landed roles in comedic commercials, determined to stay far from ghostly sets. As for me, I continued working as a production coordinator on various shoots, but I retained a healthy respect for the unknown. Even mention of a haunted location put me on edge. Late at night, my mind occasionally replayed the phantom footsteps, the foreign singing. I sometimes woke up, convinced I heard it again, only to find the city street outside my window quiet. In the end, the short film we planned had only a few salvageable behind-the-scenes photos. Kyo in her white, ragged costume, the statue in the background, a shot of the cables and lights near the brush. Those photos seemed to hum with eerie tension. Lon eventually destroyed the corrupted footage, deciding it was best left unseen. People asked me, "Do you think it was real? Ghosts? Or group hysteria?" My answer, something was there. Whether it was the collective energy of fallen souls or a manifestation of our fear, I can't be sure. But it was real enough that we fled in terror, real enough that our equipment failed in inexplicable ways, real enough that 2 actresses had mental breakdowns at the same moment. Months later, While rummaging through old production receipts, I found a crumpled piece of paper with Kyo's frantic handwriting. She must have scribbled it the day after the incident. It read, "They sang to me, like they wanted me to know they died here. I can't forget their voices." I folded it back, lips pressed tight, remembering the wave of sorrow that washed over us that night. In that single line, she captured the essence of our experience. We had trespassed upon a realm of lost soldiers, men who might only find expression in the fragments of old songs. Even now, if someone mentions Dao Tiếng or an abandoned war monument, a chill creeps up my spine. I recall the hush of the forest, the statue's chipped rifle raised to the sky, the unstoppable meltdown of our star actress. Above all, I remember the ghostly footsteps and that collective hum, a final echo of a war that never truly ended for those who died. Wherever they are, I pray they found some measure of rest after we made our apologies. Yet, in the quiet corners of my mind, I suspect those voices still drift on the Dao Tiếng breeze, waiting for the next unwary soul.